So we are going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Aloni. I'm with Schneps Media. Schneps Media is the largest local media company in the New York metro area. We publish over 80 publications, print, digital, webinars, podcasts, and events throughout Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Westchester, Staten Island, Long Island, the East End, Philadelphia, and even Palm Beach, Florida. But today we are thrilled to be here with you to share a webinar, Democratizing Philanthropy. You don't have to be a billionaire to give like one. And we're going to discuss how caring people and nonprofits work with their community foundation to make life better on Staten Island and beyond. There's a way for you to plug in and to make a difference, whether it's by aiding after a disaster, helping residents get better jobs, bolstering arts and culture, or supporting immigrant and LGBTQ communities. I'm thrilled to introduce our panel today. So first, let me please welcome New York Community Trust President, Amy Freitag. Hi, Amy.
Hey there, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. Good afternoon to everybody. And thanks so much to Schneps and my colleagues in the panel, Victoria, Laura Jean, and Carlos. We're just so pleased to be on this panel today. I'm actually celebrating my 10-month anniversary as president of the New York Community Trust. It's just an incredible opportunity after a career of lots of work with nonprofits and government, which frequently brought me to Staten Island, which makes me really excited to be on the panel today. So looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Amy. Next, please welcome Ellen Austin House's Executive Director, Victoria Monroe. Victoria, please share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi, everyone. So I have the incredible honor of, really protecting and allowing the public access to what is an incredible legacy. I run the Alice Austin House, which is a historic house museum located on Staten Island's waterfront with views of Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Jersey. And the historic site, which was originally built in 1690, was inhabited by the Austins, and its most important resident was Alice Austin. She was born in 1866 and lived until 1952, and she left us a legacy of a documentation of a changing New York City. She photographed her world, her travels, and her social circles. Austin, really broke the boundaries of what was acceptable for Victorian women at the time. And she is a trailblazer that has really left such an inspirational legacy. And she was also a lesbian woman who was in a loving relationship with Gertrude Tate for 56 years, and 30 years of that relationship was spent living at the Alice Austin House. So today, the Alice Austin House is a living, breathing photographic museum with a permanent collection that honors all the themes in Austin's life and work. And we have 3 contemporary galleries with 3 changing photographic exhibitions per year. So it's an exciting place. It's also a 15-acre public park. And so, the pandemic especially has shone a light on that need for access to green space. And the Alice Austin House provides that first publicly accessible green space from the Staten Island Ferry to the Verrazano Bridge. So we are programming, so much at the moment. It's spring, everything's in bloom. We also donate our park to other community organizations that don't have a space potentially to have performances and really shine a light on all of our friends in Staten Island.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to welcome Carlos Vargas from Make the Road New York Supervisor. Carlos.
Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. So Carlos Vargas, Make the Road New York. We're a community-based organization that builds the powers of the working class communities to achieve dignity, justice through organizing, policy, innovation, transformative education, and survival services. At the legal department, we provide immigration consultations to our communities, access to resources such as healthcare, access to healthcare, and more importantly, at the time of need, through our fellow islanders, such as the pandemic, Sandy, we're the first in line to really give back to the communities. I'm excited to be here, immigrant myself, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Carlos. And now please welcome Laura Jean Waters, Executive Director of the Staten Island Foundation. Welcome, Laura Jean. Please share about yourself.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yes, I'm Laura Jean Waters. I'm the Executive Director of the Staten Island Foundation, but I've been with the foundation since 2007, first as their program officer, and just took this role in 2021. I thank New York Community Trust, Amy and Kerry for arranging this. Our foundation was first established by a local bank. And when that bank was bought and then rebought, the leadership of the foundation recognized that Staten Island has not that many philanthropic opportunities. And so rather than being part of a larger bank, which would have to support a larger community, they held the foundation to be a private foundation focused completely on this community. So we make about $3.6 million a year in grants to education, health, community services, and arts and culture. And grant making is really only part of what we consider our mission. We are all about partnership and collaboration as a way to expand the reach of our limited resources. And because we really see collaboration as a way to strengthen community. And that's why it's so important and pleasurable for us to, from time to time, be partnered with New York Community Trust.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. What a tremendous panel. Thrilled to have you all here. So let's get started. Amy, what is the importance of philanthropy and how does it shape the community?
So giving back and supporting our neighbors in many ways is the very essence of community. At the Trust, every day, we see the joy New Yorkers derive from giving to the people and causes that inspire them. I kind of think of the Greek root of the word philanthropy, which is really literally the love of people. And that's what generous New Yorkers are doing. They're giving back to the place that was their launching pad, to the people that help them along the way, to the organizations that support those in need. This brings tremendous joy, I think, as Laura Jean just spoke of, and is literally changing and in many cases saving people's lives, not only on Staten Island, but across the city and region. You know, in New York, we wouldn't really be the same place today without philanthropy. In 2021 alone, New York State's 100,000 plus nonprofits received $1.7 billion in charitable contributions. That is a lot of philanthropy, and it impacts our lives in real ways every day, from free theater in the parks to mobile food pantries in our neighborhood. And not all the philanthropy is actually that visible. Sometimes it happens really quietly behind the scenes, like shaping policies that improve the lives of working families, or piloting new programs to help those struggling with addiction, or training young people for in-demand jobs in health and technology. So I would argue that philanthropy is part of what makes New York such a great place. It literally plays a role in everything we experience as New Yorkers.
Thank you so much for that. So Victoria and Carlos, people worry when it comes to philanthropy that they aren't wealthy and that they can't make a difference. Can each of you speak to that?
Of course, there's so many ways that people can give. My own board members are all, they're all volunteers. They're giving of their time. They're helping with shaping policy for the Ellis Austin House. We have committed garden volunteers. I know you can see my cat in the background. She knows when I'm on camera. But no, it's so important for us to be able to, always connect with people. So and as a volunteer or as a person that gives, you really start to feel like, you're a member of the institution. You can take a small membership and it's helping the institution and actually become a part of all of the incredible things that we do. I'll let Carlos say a few words too.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a good question because I think the opposition or just in ourselves, we look at the problem to be such a big issue and we think to ourselves, how can we or how can my small contribution really make a difference? But really, my mom always tells me, cada quien tenemos que poner nuestro granito de arena. Each one of us has to put our grain of sand to build a bigger movement. And if we tackle this and we look at this issue as everyone is doing their part instead of my donation is too small to even make a difference, I think really that is the message here. Do what you can, give what you can. And I can tell you from a first-hand experience that it makes all the difference. Together, it takes a village to see change. And every one of us is making a contribution, a change, no matter how small, how large. The importance here is working together. And the last piece I'll say, I heard a quote once that for those who think that a small thing cannot make a difference, have never slept in the room with a mosquito at night, right? It's such a big difference. Something so small can make such a big change.
That is a perfect analogy. Thank you so much for that. So, Amy, can you tell us about New York Community Trust? What it is and how it works?
I just love those comments, Carlos. And I would say that the New York Community Trust is in many ways an aggregation of all those beautiful grains of sand. Some are bigger grains than smaller, but as a whole, they're what make us a community foundation. So we serve the 8 counties, everything from Westchester all the way out to the east end of Long Island. And it's literally a collection of individual funds, grains of sand, established by New Yorkers, both past and present, that give back to our community. So as a community foundation, just to sort of Community Foundation 101, there's sort of 2 parts to our mission. One is we take in funds and steward them, and the other is that we make grants to high impact nonprofits like the Alice Austin House, like Make the Road, and many other nonprofits that help make our neighborhoods strong and vibrant. So just this past year, we made approximately 12,000 gifts to 5,400 New York institutions. And about a quarter of those grants were made by our own grant making team, a deep bench of issue area experts that know a lot about immigration, love Make the Road, people that love arts and culture, and know a lot about groups like the Alice Austin House. The rest of our grants are actually made by New Yorkers. They have put their funds in donor advised funds here at the trust, and then they are deciding where those grants will be made. And the majority of those stay within these 8 counties. But the beautiful thing is that we're about to celebrate our 100th anniversary next year.
Wow.
And we have been honoring the wishes of those donors for 100 years. And not only have we been doing it for 100 years past, we'll be doing it at least 100 years into the future because we are a permanent endowment here in New York. And so I could dig into just a little bit more detail about our donors because they're actually literally the wind in our sails. And I'll say that, as I was saying, there's a group of donors that are very much alive and making decisions every single day. And those are folks that have given us their donor advised funds. And basically they say, make the road, I want to make a grant. And then we do all the behind the scenes work to make that grant happen. And then we have folks that left us money a long time ago, or maybe have left us in their will, and we call those legacy gifts. And they are the amazing gifts that just go on in perpetuity and fund extraordinary projects and things in New York for literally generations. And it's kind of a combination of those 2 types of donors that let a community foundation like the New York Community Trust do the incredible grant making that we do.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that. Amy, how does New York Community Trust differ from private foundations like the Staten Island Foundation?
Yeah, so, a lot of people think of foundations, they'll think of the Ford Foundation or the Mellon Foundation or a great locally sort of focused, rooted foundation like the Staten Island Foundation. And those were often generally set up as Lord Jean told us, this was the story of a bank that went through transition. Sometimes it's a wealthy individual, sometimes it's a company like the Ford Motor Company that creates these private foundations. And generally they have a pretty specific area of work they're interested in funding, or in the case of Staten Island Foundation, a very specific geography. In contrast, the New York Community Trust is literally built by a bunch of individuals, built, I like to say, by New Yorkers for New Yorkers. And we're managing all those individual funds and pulling them together to create a real powerhouse of local philanthropy. We're like the largest, one of the largest funders of nonprofits in the 8 counties because of these individual gifts that we steward. And the other cool thing about the New York Community Trust is that we fund basically every issue area in the 8 counties, from animal welfare to climate change to health to LGBTQ issues. So we are proudly place-based and very multidisciplinary in the way that we do our work. And that's true right here on Staten Island. Over the past decade, we've made a total of $5.4 million in 78 grants to groups like Alice Austin, Make the Road, Historic Richmond Town, the Green Belt, the Children's Museum, Wagner College. But I think the bottom line is, and I think I'll hand this back to my wonderful colleagues on the panel, but there's never enough resource, right? And I think Laura Jean feels that too, when she speaks of their generous grant making. And that's really our task as a community foundation, to reach to a next generation of donors who want to carry this legacy forward and really have a passion for so many of the issues that we're facing right now, not just in Staten Island, but across all 8 counties that we serve.
Wonderfully said. And it truly is a coming together of every grain of sand. Laura Jean, private foundations often work with community foundations, as Amy was just sharing. How have you worked with New York Community Trust?
Yeah, I really love to tell that story of the grant that comes to mind quickly about arts audience. But before I do that, I'd be remiss if I didn't pick up on something that Amy just said about there never being enough resources. I think that, and probably everybody representing a community would say something like this, but Staten Island has become more and more a complicated community with some real pressing challenges. While we're the smallest borough in one of the biggest cities in the world, our population of 500,000 has become much more diverse. Poverty levels have increased. So while we don't have the numbers of New Yorkers that live here, we certainly have the percentages of challenges that the rest of the city faces. But now to answer your question about our partnership with New York Community Trust, New York City may be a major city, but sometimes it feels like a small town in that we in the philanthropic community, we have lots of different opportunities, especially before pre-COVID, to meet, talk, find areas of overlapping interest. And so for the Staten Island Foundation, increasing audiences participating in arts and culture is a priority for us. Certainly, being aware of the greater diversity of Staten Island, we were interested in reaching new audiences. Kerry McCarthy has always been a champion for inclusiveness. And so in about 2016, 2017, we had a conversation with the leader of Staten Island Arts at the time, Elizabeth Bennett, who was also enthusiastic. So all those things came together, and along with the Altman Foundation, we were able to make a joint grant to the Staten Island Arts Organization, the Borough's Arts Council, to do a number of different activities around reaching out to previously underserved communities. And I will tell you, the work that was done then still reverberates today, a few years later. It changed the way organizations worked. It also changed the way leaders saw audience development and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think it will continue in the next decades to change the face of Staten Island audiences.
That's wonderful. Certainly a huge need, and it's wonderful to hear how you both work together. So, Amy, why was New York Community Trust created?
Well, I'm going to confess my proud Ohio roots, and that the original community foundation was in Cleveland. And Cleveland, this one person in Cleveland had this big idea that if you could pool all of the charitable philanthropic resources in his community together, it could be an endowment. It could make a permanent and lasting impact on the community. And basically, there are 800 community foundations across the country that were all modeled on the Cleveland Foundation. And we all work in a similar way, where we're proudly locally focused and making real inroads over long periods of time to make systemic change happen, as well as addressing incredible urgent moments like Superstorm Sandy or 9/11 or most recently COVID. So community foundations can play this intermediary role, and I think they've just proven to be really effective over time.
Thank you for that. I know you want to share a story, Amy, about how your donors have made a transformative impact in Staten Island. Can you share one of those?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's very hard to make a choice, right? Because there's so many amazing funds. You know, it's just back to Carlos's point about the smaller grains of sand. I mean, sometimes something beautiful can come out of tragedy. And as one example was sort of a really lovely kid that grew up on Staten Island, a kid named Brian Keith, and his family who lived in Richmond Valley. You know, he was a classic Staten Island kid, delivered the Staten Island Advance. He was an altar boy. He attended Our Lady Help of Christians Elementary School and St. Peter's High School. And sadly, at 21, he was killed in an accident. And his friends and his family got together and established a scholarship in his memory. So today, the Brian Keith Fiffield Memorial Scholarship Fund assists students who excel in science at St. Peter's. And, you know, it's just a beautiful way for that young man's life, you know, to be memorialized and celebrated. So really a beautiful story. And can I share one more?
Please.
Well, you know, I think one of the things that we were really moved by is that, you know, just to Laura Jean's comment, is that immigrants and Carlos is a great example of someone giving back in such a powerful way. On Staten Island, there was this wonderful gentleman named Abdel Afghani who immigrated from Saudi Arabia to the city, and he actually had a dream of being a farmer. And, you know, there's a great tradition of farming on Staten Island, but he couldn't make a go of it, evidently, or didn't find his path as a farmer, but he found his path as an accountant, but never lost that passion for green space and the sort of beauty of nature. So upon his passing, he left a fund for the conservation, preservation, and promotion of trees, shrubs, and gardens and plant life. And so because of him, every year we're able to make grants to nonprofits that help green places like Jones Woods and High Rock Park. So when you go to those places and you hear the birds and you relax in the shade, thank Abdel.
I love that story. You know, it just shows like that your passions can live on, and it doesn't necessarily mean that your passion was meant to be your work today, but that it could be your work for an eternity. So that's really beautiful. Thank you so much. Victoria, can you tell us about the impact that donations have had on Alice Austin House and why donations are so important?
Well, I mean, really, keeping in line with what Laura Jean was explaining about the relationship that the Staten Island Foundation had with New York Community Trust and the Altman Foundation, the Alice Austin House was one of the recipients of that diverse audiences grant. And I had been struggling up until that point to get funding for a program for LGBTQ photographic storytelling. And so it was my chance to pilot this program, and it was a huge success. I did intergenerational photographic storytelling with the Sage Group at the Pride Center, and then I partnered with the GSA programs in the high schools. They're the Gender Sexuality Alliance programs. That program, which is now still funded by the Staten Island Foundation, is our largest education program at the Alice Austin House. Every GSA group on Staten Island wants to be a part of it, and we've started having requests from Brooklyn and the Bronx and now Queens. And so we're trying to expand to keep up with it, but the struggle is very real to actually fund the delivery of the program. We can prove the quality, but, you know, people are really wanting this program because it's using arts and culture as a way to celebrate identity, to celebrate diversity. And so, you know, we think it's an essential program, and it's really interesting the ways in which I think museums now can have a role in health and wellness for people and these groups that are at risk, and these high school students are particularly in a difficult place now post-COVID. So it's created an essential program and allowed me the ability to hire more teaching artists who were also representative of the LGBTQ community. And it's just a part of the whole transformation of the Alice Austen House and our expansion, and using Alice as inspiration to do contemporary storytelling and connect to contemporary issues. So the donations, they're just, we don't run without them. We can't exist without them. People often assume that the Alice Austen House, because it is on public parkland, that we are supported by Parks Department. None of our salaries are supported by Parks Department. We are a completely separate nonprofit that provides all of the services and programs and a platform for contemporary artists on the work that we do to obtain these grants. So it's a constant battle because you have to make things sustainable. But from year to year, we're not a CIG or a group that automatically gets a chunk of money. So you're constantly proving your worth at the same time as trying to deliver incredibly high quality programs. So donations are the absolute essential. I'll hand over to Carlos.
Thank you. That was a really good way for us to envision exactly from what you want to have create in the community, how you actually are impacting the community, and how critical donations are to keep that moving forward and be able to reach more, in this instance, more high school students, and be able to reach many more people. So thank you for that, Victoria. Carlos, I want to turn to you. Can you share your personal story and tell us how organizations like Make the Road use contributions to help people in different ways?
Yeah, of course. So I am a DACA recipient, which means that I have temporary protection in the U.S. Every 2 years, I have to renew that work permit. In short, I live my life in 2-year increments. And my life is like many immigrant stories. I came to the U.S. at the age of 4. And since then, I can tell you the things that have shaped my life. With a quick story, I remember arriving to the U.S. at the age of 4, really feeling poverty. And I remember going to a local organization that was connected to a religious institution. And it was during the holidays, and we went in, and my mom had no money for any gifts, right? We're barely surviving. And I remember walking in there and seeing a stack full of toys. And the father essentially gave me a truck and said, "This one is for you. You belong here. You are welcome here." It impacted my life so much because something so small, and these were donations from communities. There's donations from organizations that had really changed. That has really changed my life and impacted my life. To really just give back. I feel when you give back to organizations like this, like our organizations, like Make the Road, like the parks, like Alice Austen House, it's a gift that keeps on giving. Nothing would have been equivalent to saying, here is X. That toy at that moment made me feel like a community, made me feel welcome. And I think that's the important role that these organizations play in New York City, but specifically Staten Island. As Staten Islander, I feel that it is my duty now to give back, to give these special moments back to the person that recently arrived or the person that's having a very difficult time, to say, it's going to be okay. You belong here. Here is a token of my appreciation. For me, that has been a model that I live by, a value. I'm in law school now, and my goal is to learn the law, use the law, and change the law. And it stems back from that moment of a small contribution really shaping the life of me, of an individual, of a community member. And last, I think really putting a face to this issue. So sometimes we get caught up to say, we're gonna give this amount or this time, but really what you're given is something that keeps on giving, and you're giving it to a family, to a person, to a Carlos 30 years ago. And I think that's really is what these organizations are here for. It's a beautiful thing when we can think and believe that we are in this together. We're a community, we're New Yorkers, we're Staten Islanders, and we're here just to give everyone else a better place. So that's a little bit of my story. And really,
Carlos, that was the best example of how you do not have to give $1 billion to make a billion impact on a human being. That one truck changed your life. If that isn't screaming out about how it doesn't take a lot to make a big difference, that was right on the money. Thank you, Carlos. But please, I don't want to interrupt you, but that just like had to be highlighted. But do tell me about how Make the Road uses contributions to help people in different ways.
Yeah, Make the Road essentially, the contribution donations that come in, we give back to the community. We provide English classes, we provide resources, we provide community fairs where we, help community members, students, with their homework. A lot of times these, recent immigrant families are not, can't really help the children. So we try to, provide that source and, those tools to families. But really also, it's not that we are outnumbered, we're under organized. I think what these donations help is to really set up a model where we can share this information at a larger scale, to really, really, give back to these communities.
That's fantastic. I would love for each of you to share with me a little bit about how volunteers can help, because yes, there is a tremendous need for donations, no matter how much or how little it is, but also volunteers play a very important role. Victoria, do you want to share with us? I'll start with you to share about how volunteers can help.
Our volunteers can help in so many different ways, and it's also potentially a pathway into the field of learning about museum careers as well. So there's like it's very much a win-win situation. Our volunteers can work with us in our park. We have just created a new queer garden at the Ellis Austin House, which we're going to use for teen volunteers to provide pathways for them to connect with us during the summer when they're out of school. We have volunteer docents that learn all about Austin's story, spend time in the museum, spend time with us. And we have volunteer organizers that help us reach out to different communities on Staten Island and help us when we're hosting events at other locations, not just the Ellis Austin House. But like I said, the volunteers, it's a really rich experience because they get to learn so much and they become a part of something that's really an important movement on Staten Island to provide this recognition of a nationally designated site of LGBTQ history and just the high level of arts engagement. So also some of our volunteers are poets and readers and actors, and they come and perform at our site. Whilst we pay all of our commissioned artists and poets and things like that, there's also this moment where they come and they energize the park as well. So we give them space, even if we don't have a grant to funnel through money for them, but we give them a platform. And I consider them part of our larger volunteer program.
Fantastic. Thank you. Laura Jean, what about you and the Staten Island Foundation? How can volunteers help?
Well, there's a real spirit of volunteerism on Staten Island, and our former executive director, Betsy Dubovsky, used to say, the cavalry ain't coming to save us, we have to save ourselves. And you see that certainly in times of crisis. I'm thinking about after Superstorm Sandy, that had such an impact on Staten Island, where volunteers came from the community, but also from across the country. And then again during COVID, where people did all manner of things for their neighbors. Volunteerism, like Victoria said, is a win-win. You give your time, but you also get a lot back in terms of your experiences. The Community Service Society, which is a citywide organization, has a very, very strong program on Staten Island. Pre-COVID, they had about 750 volunteers. COVID did a number on their numbers. They were at about 150 last year and are making efforts to build that back up. People who became sick became fearful about coming out of their houses. But volunteerism changes with the times. It used to be that doctors' wives would, throw fancy parties. But I think with technology, people can actually do volunteerism from the comfort of their own home. All kinds of things can be done over Zoom with technology. So I'm going to have a conversation on Monday with the head of the local volunteerism agency to explore how we can reach out to folks and do technology and volunteerism.
I love it. There's really no barrier. It's not money. It's not getting somewhere. There's no barriers to giving of yourself. So thank you for that, Laura Jean. Carlos, what about you? What can you share about volunteer opportunities?
Yeah, volunteers are always welcome. I think it's an experience that both to give back to your community, but also the impact that you make. For example, during the end of last year, where a lot of asylum seekers were coming to the U.S., to New York City, they were being shuttled here. A lot of volunteers, took action, went to the transit center, provided blankets, provided cell phones, provided time, just being able to welcome. And I think one of the volunteers said it the best there. It's like, I am glad, I'm proud to be part of this today, because this is modern day Ellis Island. These were my great-grandparents years ago coming to a new country. So things like that, but it's also really at the time where epidemic hits, where people are volunteering, putting their bodies to really make sure people are being fed or given food. And, that can mean also from simply volunteering your skill, whether it's like, I am a carpenter by trade, I can share those resources as well, or having someone come in and teach in or help them with homework. The possibilities are endless, and that's something that we really, really encourage folks to do.
Thank you. Everyone has something to give, right? So Amy, what can you share with us about volunteerism?
Well, I love these stories, but I will just say that from our perspective, volunteering can be a fantastic way to get to know an organization firsthand. We often think the best philanthropist is one that comes to the work well-informed, and there's no better way to get to know an organization than through its programs. So volunteer to soup kitchen, see how those resources are delivered, go plant a tree, or go help with the Alice Austin new garden. The new queer garden is unbelievable. Help remove an invasive plant in your local park. That experience will give you a sense of the values of the organization, the way they engage with community, and you'll really get a feel for the work. And I think it's just the best way to approach giving in any way is rolling up your sleeves and getting into the work itself.
I love that. Thank you so much. I actually shared all of your contact information and ways to get in touch for the websites, emails, etc., so that you can learn more about donations and volunteering as well. But this has been incredible. I'd love to get to some of our questions from our attendees. So let me turn to some of those. There's a question, for Amy, what is the relationship between New York Community Trust and the local government? Is there a coordination of efforts?
Yeah, often we are trying to be close. One of the things we pride ourselves, especially in our competitive grant making program, is to address things at a very systems level. Rather than just trying to deal with the problem almost like a Band-Aid, wouldn't you rather figure out what caused the problem to begin with and try to address the underlying system issues? So I'll use the example of just recently working around the lifting of Title 42 and the really intense pressure on immigrant services in New York City to address the incredible flows that we're seeing, people coming over from the southern border. And we reached out to the mayor's office of immigrant affairs to find out how can philanthropy be most helpful to you? Because I think some people don't really know who are the real actors close to the ground, like Make the Road, like the door, like a lot of great locally serving nonprofit organizations. They're just not household names. So actually, we put in the chat a list, for example, of just 6 or 7 really fabulous organizations that are working today on the ground, trying to help immigrants navigate into New York City to get to the services, to get to the kinds of supports that are so critical, especially when people are just new to the city. So I think that, if we aren't coordinated with government, if we don't know what's going on, we can't be as effective for our donors as we need to be. That doesn't always mean we agree with the city. There's sometimes we actually don't. And sometimes we've even been in litigation with the city over something that we think really needs to change. But it's got to be a communication both with the private sector and the public sector for a community foundation to be truly effective.
Thank you for that. Along the lines of what you're saying in terms of learning about the causes, a question is, I know what causes I want to support, but I'm not sure what are the best charities to donate to. Is that something that New York Community Trust can help me identify good nonprofits? I think that's a very common concern, that you want to give, but you want to make sure you're giving to the right place.
Right. And that the giving guide that we just posted in the space of immigration, we do giving guides on a whole bunch of things because it's daunting, right? We ourselves give to thousands, tens of thousands of organizations in New York City, and that's all carefully researched and vetted. So you can also go to our website. There's a host of resources on our website. Our annual report also shares all the organizations that we give grants to. So you can pretty much bet if we've made a grant or Laura Jean's made a grant, you cannot go wrong with that organization. It's been carefully vetted. It's been really, really thoughtfully investigated. But, I think, to the degree that we can be good collaborators in the space of philanthropy and be an open door to people who may never have given a grant before and are fearful of making that wrong grant, that's why you work with your community foundation, because we can really help. And you don't have to be a billionaire for us to get on the phone and talk to you, right? I talked to a donor just the other day who'd been giving with us for decades. And she said, when I first called, there wasn't a comma in my donations. It was like $100 here. And you guys talked to me and helped me. And now there are many commas in her donations. So it's about those grains of sand that Carla spoke to and trying to help people feel both the joy and the confidence that you can make a difference.
I love that. And I love also, we've talked, Amy, before about, how it can become generational and about how, I after we had a webinar previously, and since then, like now I'm giving my kids money for their birthday that they can donate. And it's just those little things. Again, it's not thousands of dollars yet, but it's just starting that process of getting all the, whether it's children, all different levels of people involved in giving and understanding the value of helping their community. So thank you for that. So somebody had said that they're worried about a possible recession and how the nonprofit sector really hasn't even bounced back from the pandemic. So how are nonprofits doing right now in that atmosphere? Laura Jean, Victoria, Carlos, Amy?
I think that the concern is real. New York is coming back, but there are signs to be concerned about on a number of levels. The one thing that I would say, however, having gone through many crises now over the last few decades in New York City, that I have never seen more resilient, smart, passionate leadership than in the local nonprofit, world. When there's a crisis, they figure out things, and it's painful. And we encourage them to do some self-care, but that leadership, that passion from the various sectors of the system that Amy referred to, really is the greatest way to meet any crisis.
Thank you.
I would also add to what Laura Jean said. Yeah, I think we're very aware of how incredibly resilient we can be and scrappy. We got together during COVID, we formed coalitions, we met other nonprofit leaders that we'd never met before from across the city to try and work out how best to move forward. And I know that foundations were right there along with us. But, you know, leading a nonprofit is almost a little bit like there's a constant state of recession or crisis, because every year when you write that budget, you have to be really conservative, but also aspirational, you know, because you don't necessarily know that those grants that you've applied to are going to come through. So it is like a constant state that we're in of this sort of tipping point. So I think we live with it. And that's what makes us so resilient.
Absolutely. You're never going to find a time when every nonprofit says, bah, we have plenty of money. No worries. There's always a need. So thank you for that, for sure. Carlos, we had a question about how immigrants, the situation for immigrants has changed over the years on Staten Island. Can you just touch on that?
Yeah, I think it's becoming a humanitarian crisis. Before was more of, connecting immigrant communities to resources, to access, medical health care, immigration legal services. I think now it's becoming humanitarian, where people need housing, when people need food, where people need information to tell their children. So I think the demand has shifted from resources to now really just a way for many new immigrants to really find a place to stay, really find the next meal. And yeah, I think that right now there's also a lot of division in communities, right? You have a lot of people saying, these immigrants, they're here, we've been here for X amount of years. It's just a matter of really informing our communities and providing those resources for them. So I think that's how it's changed. A lot of people are fleeing violence. A lot of people are just looking for the next meal, or just simply trying to survive. We can see it in our school systems. A lot of children are coming. There's a lack of teachers. There's a lack of classrooms. And yeah, I think that's where it's shifted from simply trying to find access to community-based resources, and now really just finding shelter.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So, Amy, there's a question that just came in from Sarah. What would you say you've learned over the past 10 months? And what is this is a great question. And what is your vision? I mean, we're coming to a close. This is perfect. And what is your vision for New York Community Trust?
Oh, that's such a nice question. Thank you. Look, I feel like I'm the luckiest person in the world getting to work with this remarkable organization that has this 100-year history of doing this incredible work. I think the only thing that stops us is just finding more donors, connecting more donors to organizations like Make the Road, like the Alice Austin House, to try to build that connectivity and to build out a bigger ecosystem of philanthropy in New York City, because there's just so much work, right? To your point about the question about how the city's recovering, what the impact is on nonprofits, it's a heavy load. And the more we can do, look, I think part of what makes New York City great, I just wanted to build on what Carlos says, is our immigrant communities. That's one of the reasons why New York stayed a vibrant and powerful city throughout the 20th century, because we always welcomed immigrants, and we welcome the sort of diversity and beauty of this city. And it is that diversity and beauty that really needs to be fully manifest in our philanthropy. And we need to connect more people. We need to find more Abdels. We need to find more folks that are coming to the task of supporting the city that has been such an incredible platform for all of us. So my moonshot is to try to build a much bigger ecosystem of philanthropy with Laura Jean's help and all of our friends in philanthropy, to bring more impact, because that's what makes New York City so great and so vibrant.
Thank you. That's really well said, and a really beautiful place to leave it here. I want to thank all of you for this incredible information. Victoria, Laura Jean, Carlos, of course, Amy. I want to thank our ASL interpreter, Judy. Thank you so much. And for all of our attendees, I appreciate your being here. I hope that you were all inspired and realize that you do not have to be a billionaire to give like one, and you do not have to have hours of free time to be a volunteer. So please reach out. I've shared it in the chat. You'll get an email tomorrow with this information as well as a recording to be able to watch it again and share it with your community. We certainly hope you do so. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you to our attendees. And I wish you all to stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Have a great day, everyone.